Let me now focus for a moment on China. So the issue with China was that China's reserves were about 4 trillion. They've fallen recently to about 3.2 trillion, but in the last 6 months or so they've stabilised. This is a big deal because when it became clear that the Chinese currency, the RMB, was overvalued, money started to leave China, and initially the authorities were comfortable to allow that to happen. So Chinese corporates were paying down their US dollar debt, and individuals were moving money out of the country. That affected Australia. There was a lot of money that managed to find its way out of China, particularly into our housing market. It affected Australian banks that were operating in China because suddenly they weren't able to do much business because all the Chinese corporates didn't want to borrow in US dollars anymore, and the bank's ability to fund themselves in RMB is not as competitive as the locals, so that business started to be affected. But about 6 months ago they drew a line in the sand. I remember going to the US in February, March, talking to a lot of hedge funds who said, the best trade around is to short the RMB. And that's what they were doing in the so-called C&H market, which was the market in Hong Kong. However, they were very disappointed to find out that every time they went short, they found it was the Bank of China on the other side with 3 trillion reserves backing them up. So that trade, which was considered to be the best trade of all time, has faded away, and a lot of the profitability of our hedge funds has gone in the same direction. But it's important that the Chinese appear to have drawn a line in the sand on this fall in reserves, and I'll say a little bit about how that's affecting us. In particular, it's been affecting us, it may affect us in tourism and education. So at the moment, one of the ways in which China is losing reserves is the so-called services deficit. That's the red bit there. So you can see that's getting bigger and bigger. And that's a direct drain on their reserves. Now, that is more than offset by their trade surplus, accepted. It's now about 50%, the deficit's about 50% of the trade surplus. It may be that at some point the Chinese decide that enough is enough, and to have that drain continuing, because as you rebalance your economy toward more services, so people want to consume those services offshore as well as domestically. It may be that this drag might start to stabilise as a result of government policy. I haven't seen anything happen yet, but when I look at that story, I go, well, if the Chinese really do want to protect their reserves in order to protect the system that's built up, the government-to-government lending, etc., one way would be to slow down that that services export policy. So that worries me a little. Another way, of course, is hot money. So last year, if you look at the grey bars, you look how hot money, which is retail money, left the country so rapidly. This year, the grey line has gone flat. In other words, evidence of large amounts of hot money, retail money, leaving the country has basically been eliminated. All sorts of ways used to be used to get money out of the country. Probably the best way, probably the most amusing way that we hear about is the jewellery trick. So if you take your loved one for a romantic weekend in Macau and take her to the jewellery store and buy her the biggest possible diamond ring, you're a very, very popular man. Trouble is, you walk out, you turn left down this lane to a pawn shop and pawn the ring. So you pay for the ring with an RMB credit card, but when you pawn the ring, they pay you in Hong Kong dollars. You pay a 10% discount, but you've got money out of the country. And as you're walking across the road, chasing your lady who's not too happy about the fact that she's lost her ring, that diamond is moving its way back into the jewellery store to do another circuit. So quite a lot of money can be engineered out of the country in a day with one diamond. And of course, those sorts of things and a lot of other ways in which China was getting money out of the country have been stopped. And that also has implications for Australia, as I will discuss later.